This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Jim Lee, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hi, I'm Ken Jurgens, and you're listening to the Batman Universe.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast, episode number 263. I'm your host, Dustin, and today I have with me
Tony.
And this is Ian.
And we are bringing the latest comic news and comic book reviews from the weeks of December 2nd through the 15th. We have a very small amount of news to cover. Most of it can't even be classified as news, but we do have two books to cover, including Batman the Detective as usual, and we have a bunch of listener questions that we're going to cover and forego the Monkey Watch because of the questions and the discussions that some of them are going to present. So let's jump straight into what we are going to consider news now. So over the past 2 weeks, there's been not really any real news that has released. Solicitations are right around the corner. We'll get to that stuff in a second. But I'm not even joking when I say, like, within 24 hours of the last time we recorded an episode, we had a tweet that was released, or that was posted by Tom King, where he specifically laid out what he has planned for at least the next 6 to 8 months of the titles. I think it's actually further than that too. But basically he said that issue 60, which we're going to talk about in a minute, wraps up the post-wedding Cold Days arc. 61 through 69 is called Nightmares, an epic arc scraping at the soul of Batman, with a flash break for 64 and 65. 70 through 74 is called The Fall and the Fallen. And then 75, he says, is a huge Bat event with a secret name that sets up for the end at 105. And then he included a piece of art, which, I mean, it was just a random piece of art that was from the upcoming issue. But I want to talk about this quick for a second because 60 is out, and 61, as you're listening to this, is out as well. And I want to talk about the idea of what we're getting, because without going into full details of what's in 60, because we'll save that for the review, something happens at the end of 60 that kind of is very much a cliffhanger. 61 is going to come, and based off of tweets that have released since then, we know that 61 deals with the Master Bruce. 62 is Mitch Gerard coming back and teaming with Tom King again, and it's a Professor Pig story. We have 63. I'm not real sure what 63 is. I'm sure there is some sort of details out there, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. 64, 65 are the Flash break, with the Flash crossover in February. March dives right back into the Nightmares arc that he's trying to accomplish. The solicitations for this basically say that it includes Vic Sage, the Question. He's popping up at some point, and Lee Weeks is going to be on number 67. That's the information we know at this point. So that brings us through March of next year. Now, the question that I want to pose is, doesn't it feel like this Nightmares thing, as well as the Flash thing, seems like they're putting the story on hold for some purpose? Because, to be honest, I know the listeners out there are, I don't know if you all read 61 yet, but we get review copies from DC for the books the Friday before they release. So 61 is out there for us to have read. I don't know if Tony read it yet, but I read through it, and 61 does not in any way, shape, or form reference or pick up to the cliffhanger that's at the end of 60, which I find slightly annoying. But I feel like this is not the first time this has happened. I feel like what we're getting is another short story that's going to just randomly happen. And while it could be some sort of vision or something that is being induced by the cliffhanger at the end of 60, I find it slightly strange that we're diving into 10 issues of whatever he's classifying as these nightmares with a K and not just proceeding the story. We were complaining about this not that long ago about the fact that the story just feels like it's longer than it needs to be. The overall story is longer than it needs to be because he has this goal of getting to 100 issues. So we have all this extra stuff that's happening in between. And there's nothing wrong with having these smaller stories or having these things that are not significant to the overall plot of the story. The problem is when you leave a story, you leave the main 100 arc story on a cliffhanger in the middle of the story because you want to then move into this stuff that is, by all counts and purposes, filler or fluff, and that's the issue. So do you guys have any issues with the fact that the cliffhanger of 60 is just basically going to sit there for the unforeseen future?
I don't know which camp I'm in. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I feel like Tom's. I'm gonna call him Tom. I feel like Tom's, the way how he's writing the story, it's very long form. It's very. I can see the grand picture that he's trying to do, and how he's trying to put all these pieces together. And so, unfortunately, with the comic book, it's going to take away issues that we kind of want. We want our questions answered, but he's going to go off this little tangent, and then at the very end, it's all going to work together, and that's going to be great and cool. And so I kind of see that, and as like a reader, it's kind of annoying just to wait for 100 issues to get done. I like the story though, and so like to me, it's that I don't quite know which camp I'm in because I do like the story. I do know what he's trying to do, but I am pretty impatient, and I want it. I just want. Why is there a Flashpoint Batman? I mean, I want to know that. So I don't know which camp I'm in yet.
So my response to Tony, I think that you're absolutely right. The whole thing about Tom King setting things up and then paying them off has always been part of the way he writes in Grayson and in his 12-issue miniseries. He's just doing that almost 10 times longer with Batman. And I think the problem is he's also sometimes getting a bit sidetracked. I feel like The Gift, starring Booster Gold, is one of the ones I think Dustin would point at, and I would agree, as a distraction from the ongoing narrative of the title, from what Tom King has made us care about. So at that point, it was we cared about Batman and Catwoman's relationship and them maybe getting married. Now we care about this conflict between Batman and Bane, and now Flashpoint Batman's been added to the mix. So he's set up this thing that he wants us to care about, and then he tells us something else that we don't care about as much. I still have faith that all of this will combine into some kind of powerful conclusion because he's done it for most of his other projects. I just may or may not find each individual issue as compelling as I wish. And I definitely have that problem with 61.
I feel like this issue, though, is a little bit better than the Booster Gold one because, we have already met this kid once before. And it's talking about Bruce's past, even if it's not necessarily his own childhood, but a very other world, basically his own past. So, we kind of care about that, but Booster Gold, I totally agree. It just was weird.
Well, and that was set up for Heroes in Crisis, which wasn't even part of the main Batman title, so that's part of why I pointed it out, because it sort of ties into number 50, and he has Catwoman talk about it, but I just didn't. I don't appreciate that he used it as advertisement for an upcoming event.
Yeah, but that's not even the only one. I mean, I could go back and you could say that the button, for example, which is part of the issue count that he's doing, the button by itself doesn't really fall in line with what he's doing. There was the Swamp Thing one shot. There was the the first issue with the Master Bruce thing. That none of that stuff really falls in line. I mean, sure, he's clearly going back to some of this stuff, but
the button is where we get Flashpoint Batman, though. I think that one actually you can really count as part of this whole arc. Now that Flashpoint Batman is shown to be really a big part of the ongoing conflict.
True. Now you can, but I don't think...
That's what I'm saying. You got to wait until he reveals the way it fits.
Until he pops up. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, that really doesn't fall in line. It's just... I mean, honestly, still to this day, I try to understand why exactly that needed to happen when it did, because it didn't actually have any sort of effect on anything else at the time, and it was promoted as like this big thing, and it really didn't do anything.
That was clearly an editorial decision. I don't think that was Tom King's decision at all.
I mean, I think a lot of times I think a lot of what we're seeing when they're pushing certain things is editorial, making things seem like they are bigger than they really are. But, I'm on the side of, I get that he wants to do a certain number of issues. That I don't know. Here's my concern. My concern, and I'm sure I've said this before, and I'm going to sound like a broken record. My concern is, I like the idea of having one giant overarching story. What I don't like is feeling like it's all in chapters, but there's chapters in between the chapters of the main story. And that's where I have a problem. I don't like it's one thing if it's like 2 issues because of the button. I didn't really, get upset about the button when it happened, mostly because we all thought it was going to be bigger than it was. But I didn't get upset about the button being in the middle of what was going on at the time because there was no real reason to get upset about it. This is 10 issues, though. Almost 10 issues. 61 through 69 is what he's saying is going to be this next one. That's actually 8 issues, or 9 issues. It is 9 issues, but 9 issues is a lot of time. I mean, that comes down to 4.5 months of this stuff. And even though 2 of those issues are going to be this Flash crossover, which again has nothing to do with everything else that's going on, it's just one of those things.
Well,
where
he says it's about Gotham Girl, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was part of the ongoing story contained there.
He said that the Flash the Flash crossover had to do with Gotham Girl.
Mm-hmm. It's in the solicit.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out because I don't remember that, but. I don't know. The biggest thing that I have an issue with is just the fact that it just feels like we're putting so much on hold, and it's not because it needs to be put on hold. It's just because it's this weird necessity to achieve 100 issues, or 105 in this case. But I don't know. I'm slightly annoyed because it'd be one thing if it was like a bunch of arcs that led up to this bigger overarching story with Bane. But some of these smaller arcs have nothing to do with it. Or they go out, let's be honest here. The Catwoman stuff was great. I loved it. It was good stuff. But looking back on it, think about how much time we spent with the Catwoman stuff only to build to nothing. Or in the case of Tom King's argument, building to a humongous letdown to advance his story. But think about how much time we spent building that up when in reality, by the time issue 50 happened, it all just went right out the window. So we just spent so many months building this thing that didn't actually happen to nothing. And that's the problem that I'm having.
Well, I would disagree that it's for nothing. Those issues were very enjoyable in and of themselves for me. Even knowing what's coming in 50, I've gone back and reread a lot of the Catwoman stuff, and it holds up as really solidly written Catwoman Batman relationship stuff. Good character development for both of them. Some great art. And I would point out at something like Hush, where the Batman Catwoman relationship ends with Batman being more paranoid and not trusting Catwoman than ever, but there's still a lot of really great stuff in the middle. I've said this a lot of times, but if we're in superhero comics for endings, we're in the wrong type of story. These are just infinite middles, and it's our job to find the enjoyment in the middle. And I'm doing that with that, and I would say that a lot of the enjoyment of the pre-wedding stuff was still enjoyable now.
I'm not going to say it was unenjoyable, because I did enjoy it at the time. But I think, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to think about this too much. I did pull up the solicitation. It does have the very last line of the solicitation says, "And how does Gotham Girl fit into all of this?" So there is a hint that that could be included in some way, shape, or form. But I'm not going to hold my breath on that for right now. All right, so next thing I want to talk about is, so solicitations, as you're listening to this, have released. They released on the 17th. We're expecting them to release on the 17th because that's when they typically release. We have leaked copy of the solicitations. Our copy does not include the creators attached, so we don't know if there's any creator changes. But I want to quickly. There's only like a couple of real quick small things to like mention that are I should say are worth mentioning that are happening in March. First one, Teen Titans is going to be crossing over with Deathstroke for at least a couple months, because the issue of Deathstroke says it's a prelude to what's coming, and then Teen Titans says it's part one. So it's at least a couple issues. I would guess at least it's going to be in March and April, maybe even into May as well. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe there'll be a little bit more information about how many parts once the solicit's actually released, but our copy just says prelude in part one. So there's that. Detective Comics number 1000 is coming in March as well. Interestingly enough, it's the only issue of Detective Comics that's releasing, so there is not going to be 2 issues of Detective Comics in March. You could look at that however you want. I'm looking at it as, well, Detective Comics number 1000 is going to be double the price, so they're going to do us a favor and not have 2 issues in the month, because you can't really compare it to Action Comics, because Action Comics, once that 1000 issue came out, all the other Superman titles stopped, including Action Comics, and then they had that Man of Steel miniseries for a while before Action and Superman picked back up in July, like 3 months later. So that being said, we know that that's not happening with Detective Comics. It's not going to be on a hiatus or anything like that, but it is going to be the only issue of Detective Comics. Solicitation does not state who is actually attached, but it does say that it is 96 pages, which is expected. It has an unbelievable lineup of talent that will take you on a journey through Batman's past, present, and future, plus a sensational epilogue that features the first ever DC Universe appearance of the deadly Arkham Knight. But who's under the mask, and why do they want Batman dead? The incredible future of Batman adventures begins here. So there's that. I'm guessing the lineup of talent that's going to take you on a journey of the past, present, and future. I'm hoping they're stories and they're not just pinups. I'm starting to get slightly worried about the pinups, because we got that in Batman number 50, and quite honestly, I don't
have too many pinups in Action 1000 though.
That's true, we didn't, but I'm just comparing it back to Batman 50, and the amount of creators attached to Action Comics number 1000 was great, and they actually had stories to tell, and that was all great, and props to them. But I have this weird feeling that after what they did with Batman number 50, with having like a massive amount of creators attached, and then it all ended up being a bunch of pinups that had nothing to do with the actual story and just was a reason to make the issue overly large and more expensive, was frustrating to say the least. So anyway, by the time you're reading this, we'll probably know a little bit more. Also, while you're listening to this, there's been hints that on Tuesday, December 18th, which I said has already happened while you're listening to this, there's supposed to be some sort of Detective Comics number 1000 reveal. I'm guessing it probably has to do with the covers or the variant cover program that's going to be attached to the issue. Action Comics number 1000 had a bunch of variants. I'm guessing that's going to happen with Detective Comics as well. They've been hinting at on Twitter Thursday and Friday of the week before you're listening to this that that something was going to be revealed on Tuesday, and I'm also assuming that's probably going to be the last news that we get for the rest of 2018. Hopefully we have more details related to who's going to be attached. Maybe they'll release even more details on Tuesday. But if you are interested in what they potentially announce, head over to the site and we will have all those details up for you guys to check out. And then obviously the next time we record, we will talk about those as well. The only other worth mentioning thing that happened outside of Batman Damned is supposed to be ending in March. That'll be the third issue. It's coming in March, even though it was originally supposed to come in January. It's now officially coming out in March, unless, of course, it gets delayed yet again. Is that James Jr. is going to be reappearing in Batgirl number 33. We remember he did recently appear in, I believe it was Batgirl. Was it the annual or 26?
It was the annual.
Annual, okay. He appeared in the annual briefly, but the cover of Batgirl number 33 actually has him out of prison. So Batgirl is seemingly going to be going after him. The solicitation says it's election day in Gotham City, and Barbara Gordon is running ragged on both ends as she tries to balance campaigning for her new boss with keeping the peace as a superhero. Could the sudden appearance of her murderous brother James Jr. push her over the edge? So, needless to say, I've said this multiple times. I've been enjoying Batgirl, looking forward to what's coming. So, that is the highlights of the solicitations. We'll have more details on everything come next episode. So with that, we're going to dive straight into our comic book reviews, and the first one we've got is Batman.
Batman number 60, writing by Tom King, art by Mikel Janin and Jorge Fornes. Apologies to Jessica and any of our people who speak other languages for the mispronunciation. So, Batman number 60. At 5 in the morning, Jim Gordon wakes up and goes to work, starting the day by working with Harvey Bullock on reviewing Batman's behavior since issue number 50. Elsewhere, Batman brutally interrogates Maxie Zeus, recently released from Arkham, about Penguin's story of Bane. In Wayne Manor, Alfred watches Penguin in a cage, the mob boss blindfolded. Bullock and Gordon discuss Batman's fight with KG Beast, who was picked up by the international intelligence community after Batman broke his neck in Russia. Gordon is shaken by Batman's violence, though Bullock says anything's possible. Batman plays yo-yo with Firefly, sometimes without a string, and the criminal insists that Bane never left his cell. Penguin and Alfred discuss the poem Penguin quoted in the first issue of this arc, Shakespeare's The Phoenix and the Turtle. Penguin thought it was pretty, but now knows it is horrible. Detective Montoya notifies Gordon of Batman's treatment of Maxie Zeus, and Gordon's anger and confusion grows. On a rooftop, Batman punches Kite Man, to which he shouts, "Hell yeah." Alfred opens Penguin's cage to feed him. Gordon borrows a baseball bat and heads to the roof. Batman's interrogations continue, with every criminal saying the same thing. Bane is broken, staying in his cell. As Alfred feeds him, Penguin elaborates on his theory about the Shakespeare poem, that it is about the death of love. As he weeps over his dead wife Penny, a new voice interrupts him. Terrified, Penguin claims he never told Batman about the voice, as it claims that Batman is already here. Gordon smashes the bat signal as more reports of Batman's violent investigations pour in, shouting, "No more." Arriving in the Batcave, Batman finds everything dark, with Alfred on the floor, beaten brutally. As Bruce stoops to help Alfred, the butler weakly tries to tell that Batman, that Flashpoint Batman, his alternate universe father, is standing behind them. So, I just have two questions about this issue. The first is, what does Thomas's appearance mean? Is he the true big bad? We've been led to believe that Bane is in charge, but the way Penguin acts around Flashpoint Batman seems like he's a lot bigger in the scheme against Batman than we thought. And do we think that this is connected to Doomsday Clock and the Rebirth plot? I hate suggesting that, because the whole trying to figure out where the connections to Watchmen thing is a little too conspiracy theory for me, but the ability to create a bubble to preserve the Flashpoint universe, as we saw on the button, and then yank him out of that bubble to our reality seems like something only someone on the power level of Dr. Manhattan could do.
So, your first question about is Flashpoint Batman, or does Flashpoint Batman have more of a pull in this entire plot than we think? I don't know. Here's the thing. I'm kind of at a loss because I was at a loss when Flashpoint Batman appeared in Batman number 50, and he was there, and it was like, why is he here? And it didn't make a lot of sense. Anything we've seen with Flashpoint Batman, it's not as if he is like this evil Batman from like a different Earth. He's just a different version of Batman from a different Earth. He's Thomas Wayne as Batman because Bruce Wayne died. We've seen the story. We've talked about the story. Flashpoint Batman, the miniseries, is actually really, really good. I suggest you check it out if you haven't. But the entire thing is like, he's not like some sort of, like, sure, he's more violent and slightly more twisted, but he's not an evil version of Batman, and he wouldn't be coming after Bruce Wayne just to come after him. So I feel like there's some sort of swerve thing going on here. And I mean, you could literally chalk it up to all kinds of stuff. Psycho Pirate being involved, Dr. Manhattan. You could say however you could bring it up however you want. We know that there are characters who can travel through dimensions and get to different universes. The Flash characters are the ones that obviously come to mind because they're the ones that were involved in the Button and in Flashpoint that have had situations where Thomas Wayne has appeared. So the immediate response would be, is there a Flash character involved? We know that during the Button, Reverse Flash was involved in that entire situation that kind of caused the Button. But I guess my thing is, it would either be maybe he is bigger than we think, but Bane still is running things. But I just don't see it being Thomas Wayne. I feel like if this is truly an evil version, what if it's like Reverse Flash disguised as Thomas Wayne Batman? I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm just throwing ideas out there because the thing is, I just don't see how Thomas Wayne, as we've seen him in Flashpoint, would come to be like this horrible character who is trying to take out his son and side with Bane, especially after we saw, him suggest to Bruce to settle down and to have a family and not, be Batman forever. So, like, why would we get to this? So that's my only thought, is maybe this isn't what we think it is. Maybe it is somebody who's just disguised as that, and the intent is to, like, throw him off because we know what that suit means.
What did Flashpoint Batman give Barry? What were the contents of the letter that he gave Barry to give to Bruce
after Flashpoint?
Yep.
I believe it just said, "I'm proud of you," or I'd always be proud of you.
Okay, I was just thinking either it was from that or the last time he said, "Don't be Batman." Maybe just like some twisted punishment for still being Batman and not like heeding his advice. I don't know. I was going somewhere like that. Once again, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with all this speculation. I was just curious because, to me, when I saw how terrified Penguin was of Flashpoint Batman, it felt like he's willing to betray Bane, but not Flashpoint Batman. That, to me, implies that maybe Flashpoint Batman is somehow in charge of this, and the fact that he told Bruce not to be Batman and then shows up in number 50 aside Bane. I mean, obviously there's something going on, and I would bet that 70 to 74, The Fall and the Fallen, are going to deal with that. I was just wondering if anyone had a different read than me.
I honestly can't say that I have a different read. I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like there's some sort of swerve that eventually just has to happen. Because if there isn't, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get why he's involved. And that's the thing that's like bugging me worse than most things regarding this. Is just, I don't understand why he's even involved in this in the first place. Other than just the weird connection that we have to the Button story that already happened. And then it just gets weird because it's like, well, why exactly do we need to have these ridiculous references to the previous story arcs just for the sake of having them all connected somehow? So
my second question is, the upcoming issues of this, we've already talked a little bit about this, are called Nightmares. Do you think that Flashpoint Batman and or Bane will capture Batman and subject him to virtual reality or brainwashing? That's my current theory on what's going to be going on for the next 10 issues, except for the crossover with the Flash. What do you think? Well,
it could literally be. It could be any of them. I don't know that it would be. I don't know that I'm gonna stay away from the virtual reality because I feel like that's what's happening in Heroes in Crisis right now. But brainwashing entirely possible, or just mind control, which still falls into that brainwashing thing. Is I feel like there's characters involved in Bane's plot so far up to this point that could easily be the reason as to why we're going to see what we're going to see during these nightmare arcs. It'll be more of a question of, is everything that we're seeing, not real, or a version of it, or, how much of what we're seeing is real? And I don't see VR as the reasoning, but I feel like if it is some sort of brainwashing or mind control, it would explain why we keep seeing Flashpoint Batman. Although there are certain points where I don't understand it. It's just I pulled up that letter just so that we could reference it. It says, "Dear son, there's only one thing that I know about life. I know some things happen by chance." And then it says, "Love always your father, Thomas." And that's it. That's literally the entire letter. So that was the letter at the end of Flashpoint, which made Bruce cry. The stuff that happened during the Button was like, it was basically, you don't have to be Batman forever, get married, have a family, live your life. I remember that being that. So, I mean, that's that.
Tony, anything?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So, Batman number 60, I'm going to give a total of 3.5.
I'll give that 3.5.
I believe I also gave it 3.5.
All right, so that's going to give Batman a total of 3.5 out of 5 Batarangs. So move into our next book, Detective Comics. Detective Comics number 994, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Doug Mankey. The issue starts off where Batman meets Commissioner Gordon at the Gotham City Aquarium. A young couple is found dead inside one of the tanks, and they resemble the late Martha and Thomas Wayne. Gordon recounts the Waynes were his first double murder. Batman says that they were his as well. Instead of waiting for the GCPD diver to fish the bodies out, Batman uses an explosive to empty out the tank. These bodies were staged to look like the Waynes. Every little detail has been accounted for. Batman says that they even have replicas of their wedding rings. Batman notes whoever had these innocent people killed took extreme measures to recreate the Waynes' murder. Extensive plastic surgery was used to have the deceased look like the real Waynes. Gordon even notes their bullet wounds are in the exact same place as the Waynes. While examining the body of the deceased male, Batman recognizes that there is something abnormal with the cause of death. After examining the male's eyes, he realizes that they did not drown. Batman turns the body over and tries to expel the water in his chest with only a little exiting the body. Batman realizes something is blocking his airway. Batman looks down this man's throat and retrieves a pearl. The pearl comes from the torn necklace of Martha Wayne. Batman tells Gordon that there is probably a pearl in the woman's throat, and these pearls were administered post-mortem. These couples were murdered elsewhere. Gordon asks why these people were dressed like the Waynes, and Batman states it is the anniversary of their death. At Park Row Community Clinic, the always diligent Leslie Tompkins, who stayed late for work, heads home to grab a bit of sleep before her shift that begins in a few hours. A monster stands in front of her holding a bat signal. Leslie runs inside her clinic and radios Batman to come and help her. Batman immediately tells Gordon to meet him at Park Row Clinic. Batman speeds towards her in the Batmobile. Leslie updates Batman that this thing is impenetrable to bullets and is seemingly following her. Batman tells her to jump from the roof of the building to the one across the street. She hesitates and decides to hide instead, not knowing Batman was going to catch her midair. Leslie realizes this thing is after Batman and tells it to leave Gotham's hero alone. She stabs the thing in the back, only to make it angrier. Holding Leslie by the throat, this thing emits a gas and forces Leslie to breathe it in. Batman comes in and frees her from its grasp. Batman tries to fight it in hand-to-hand combat, but realizes that it is a useless endeavor. He throws 2 explosives at the thing, and in response, it throws Leslie over the roof. Batman catches her before she hits the ground and asks if she's okay. While holding back a hysterical laugh and terrifying grin, she says that she does not think so. All right, so first things first, I have to bring this up because, I mean, I would be stupid not to. Peter Tomasi is on the title, which, as you most of you are aware, whether or not you are on Discord, you heard about the fact that we had a T-shirt, a limited edition T-shirt created that said "I want Tomasi," and the fact that we've been harping that James Robinson's Detective Comics for the past 2.5 months has been really bad. This is something that I've been looking forward to greatly. I've enjoyed Peter Tomasi's work in the past. I was pleasantly looking forward to him coming to Detective Comics, if for no other reason but to have a clear direction to the stories. I mean, like, it doesn't. This clearly. I mean, we know that he's going to be on the book through 1,000, past 1,000. He's going to be on the title for a while. So knowing that there's a creator, regardless of who it is, knowing that there's a creator who's going to be attached to the title for an extended amount of time and not just here for one arc, that's always a good thing. Not to speak ill of Brian Hill, his arc was good, but he was only on the book for one arc, and we knew that going into it. I enjoyed Tomasi, and I've enjoyed Tomasi in the past. I know Ian has not enjoyed him as much as I have, and he wasn't looking forward to it as much as me. So I posed the question to Tony about whether or not you looked forward to this. I know you reviewed the book over on the site, and honestly, that limited edition shirt derived from your quote from one of your reviews. But so going first with Tony, what were you looking forward to this, and were you looking forward to it more than just because the previous stuff from Robinson was so bad that it just really made you interested in what Tomasi was going to do, or because of Tomasi in general?
I am so happy. I can finally review comics with a smile. Oh my word, I'm happy. Most of it, I don't really know much of Tomasi's stuff really outside of like Superman. When I first kind of got into stuff, I read his like Superman runs, and I enjoyed it. I liked it, But I know that he wrote Batman and Robin during New 52 and some stuff like that. I don't know him that well, but you know what? He can write decent dialogue. It's a good story. Even if you don't really like him, it's just better than James Robinson. Like, you can read it and just be like, man, that's a decent comic. So I'm happy because of that. I'm just happy.
All right, so then my counter is, Ian, what did you think of the issue?
Well, as people who've listened to the cast for a while and heard all my very long letters that Ed was very frustrated with, I don't enjoy Tomasi's attitude towards the Bat family or his moral framework. And what I mean by that is he portrays Batman, and also Damian, because he was writing Batman and Robin for a long time, as very self-centered and narcissistic and flawed characters, and that's good. I am here for a flawed Batman and a flawed Damian, and it's part of why they're compelling characters. The problem is, I get the sense that he morally justifies their bad behavior because they're in so much pain. I do think both Batman and Damian have experienced extraordinary trauma, and the fact that they are heroic is a testament to their strength of character and their moral fortitude. I don't think that justifies them hurting other people, and I feel like Tomasi expects us to be okay with that, because he will often just juxtapose Damian or Batman just being incredibly cruel or insensitive, and then he'll just show Damian crying, or they'll have a tender moment. One thing I'll say, Tomasi's very, very good at the tender moment. And I myself found things like his 5 stages of grief and the pearl, which I find really interesting, because Damian was only able to find one pearl in his long stretch of looking through the sewers, and apparently this villain found 2 more. So I'm sure that'll play part of what's going on, because, it's the same writer, so he's probably got a plan. I find his emotional moments very affecting, but looking back on them, they ring morally hollow. And so this issue didn't really... It was all table setting. It was all setting up for the villain and the conflict leading into 1000. So it wasn't particularly egregious in its way that it approached Batman. I don't think Batman was, being particularly unkind or cruel or insensitive. He was just being Batman, which is fine. So I'd say this is probably a bit above my expectations, but it's also all table setting, so Tomasi hasn't really had a chance to do that much in terms of the stuff that I'm concerned about. I do want to bring up a couple of issues. Tomasi's promised that this is going to be hardcore detective, and then he has Batman contaminating the crime scene by using a bomb to release water all over the crime scene. And then I had some conversations on some other forums about the way he portrayed Leslie Tompkins. I don't want to go too far, because I know there are people who have been around since Jason Todd died. They actually voted on that. So there's people who have way more experience and way more knowledge and passion than I do for the history. But I have been around for 10 years in terms of reading Batman comics and committing stuff to my personal timeline and my interaction with them. My experience with the character of Leslie Tompkins rings false with the way that Tomasi portrays her, because she's an extreme pacifist. She's not against violence just because she doesn't like the consequences of violence. She's against violence because of the consequences to the moral fiber of the person who does it. That's why she opposes Batman, because she loves him like a son, because she's one of the friends. She's sort of Alfred's generation, so she functioned as sort of a surrogate grandmother or mother to Bruce when he was young, depending on the ages of the character. She was aged down in the New 52, and they've kept that here. But here, she's willing to attack this monster. And I've heard arguments that it's sensible, it's not a sentient being, it's not a human, so she's okay with it. It still rings incredibly false to me. Leslie is such a gentle character by explicit choice that didn't ring true. And somebody else said that this could be an explicit change. This could be something that Tomasi said, that level of pacifism was unrealistic, so I'm going to have a more realistic Leslie now.
I mean, being attacked.
She's been attacked by Zaz and refused to hurt him. So I just don't buy the self-defense thing, because Leslie just wouldn't be violent.
Where was that? That just happened.
No, that was in No Man's Land.
No.
Did you? Oh, you read it for the Stella's podcast.
That's why I was thinking, oh man, this is why I have a hard time reading older comics, because then they stick in my mind for too long. But yes, there was a story in No Man's Land where Zaz was there and Batman was like, "We'll just get him out of here," and she's like, "No, we're not going to get him out of here. He's got to stay here." Yeah, I mean, I can see the Leslie issue, but who's to say? Like, I completely agree. Okay, let me rephrase this. So I enjoyed it a lot, but it is very much a setup. We're clearly setting up the story. I'm in the boat with Tony. This is way better than James Robinson. It actually
I'll give you on a line-by-line level, Tomasi's much more competent than Robinson. So that was definitely a step up.
Yes, there's that. And then the other part of it is, for me at least, not that I had an issue with the art, but I enjoyed this art way more than the stuff that we got from DiGianminco the last. Did I say that?
Carmine. Just call him Carmine.
Yeah, Carmine. Sure, Carmine. From the last, from the Robinson story arc, that stuff was good, but I really like Doug Mankia way more. So there's that part of it. But as a whole, the story, like, it was clearly setting things up. I did finish the issue and was like, man, I really want the next issue. But that's why that's part of the reason why when I look at stories, if I want to get to the next issue, then I'm enjoying the story. I could care less about what was going on with that Two-Face story. I didn't care where it was going.
Well, one question about the end of this issue. It looked to me like Leslie had sort of been poisoned by Joker toxin. Is that what it looked like to you?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
That's my.
I think that's what's being implied.
Yeah, she's gotten Joker gas or Joker toxin, and that's what happened, and she's laughing and got the smile because that's what's happening. There's also, I've read some stuff online saying that the creature we're seeing is somebody who has been infected by Joker venom, which
so like a mix of toxin and Bane's venom.
Yeah, that goes back to Arkham Asylum, the video game.
Oh,
and
I haven't played that.
See, I think that's the thing. Knowing that Arkham Knight from the video game is going to be coming into the comics for issue 999 and then 1000, I'm guessing Tomasi is trying to take some of the elements from those games and like kind of try to figure out a way to make them canon.
Do you think this will be like a multiverse, or do you think he's actually going to adapt it to be in the main continuity?
No, I think he's adapting it to be in the main continuity.
Okay.
I don't know that he's like obviously he's not adapting it the way it was in those games, but I think making like
give Jason Todd a third identity.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's going to be Jason Todd, but I feel like we're already getting started because the fact whoever is knowledgeable of the Wayne's murder and staged this thing is probably the Arkham Knight. Just guessing because of issue counts between now and then. There's just not that many issues that you can go without eventually getting to the Arkham Knight. So unless this is like a really quick story where it's only like 4 issues and then they go into a new story arc that then introduce the Arkham Knight, which I just don't see because there's not even enough issues between here and 999 to do a complete trade like normal. So this one only, if you've got, there's only 6 issues between here and number 1000, not including 1000 because it'll be its own thing. So the 6 issues between here and 1000 have to be, the trade essentially. And I don't see them doing like a 3-issue story arc because it doesn't work. So anyway, that's being said, I feel like whoever the Arkham Knight is going to end up being, which I'm intrigued to see who it will be, but that we're not even seeing any part of that right now, other than somebody's really involved with the Wayne murders. Not to say that they specifically know that Bruce Wayne is Batman, but that is implied, knowing that Batman's going to be involved with this. He's not staging this. Like, why of all the people in the world would they stage the Wayne's murder if they don't have any knowledge that Batman is somehow connected? So that being said, I would say that it's interesting to see the beginning of something that is going to turn into something bigger. I've seen the comments online about how they think that the hulking creature is somebody who has the Joker venom in them, and that's why he's hulking and he's so big, and he's specifically seeking out Batman. That plays along with what we know of Joker venom from the game, but again, that stuff's not canon. So you're just kind of guessing at this point until we get a little bit more of the story, which unfortunately isn't going to happen until January because of the holiday and them not having comics in the 4th week of December. We're just not going to even get anything until January, although we will be getting 4 or 3 issues in the month of January to make up for this. But I
do think the Joker venom is a very good guess. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And the thing is, but that also goes against the Leslie thing, because if it's somebody with Joker venom in them, they are a real human. It's not like just some creature that was made with test tubes. This is legitimately somebody who's been infected by
Talon.
Yeah. So So there's that part of it. I see your issue with Leslie, but at the same time, I'm looking at it from, well, let's see where this goes. I like that she's included in the story because
yeah,
the last time we saw her within Detective Comics was back during Tynan's run, and we had like she just did pop up in the Batman Annual too, but outside of that, she hasn't really been around. So I'm glad to see her. I love but I see your issue. The thing that I really enjoyed also was, this is Detective Comics. I've always thought that Detective Comics, when they pitch the idea of we're going to tell detective stories in Detective Comics, I love the idea, but the execution isn't always there. This legitimately, at least the first like half of the book, is Batman being a detective. Yes, there is the issue with him putting the explosive on the tank. That is a fault. I don't understand that. It does contaminate the entire site.
Good luck getting a jury to agree with you on anything from that crime scene.
Yeah, I mean, like the explanation could have been there, that he scanned the area and there was nothing else there. Who knows? But the thing is, that wasn't explained. You needed to explain it if you weren't going to make it. But especially since like the diver was there, it wasn't like it was going to take that much time. It was more about like he was acting impatient, but we don't even have any idea why he's acting impatient. That being said,
this is Batman. His parents are being like parodied here, so I can understand him acting irrationally. I just wish they'd been a little clearer. That's what's going on.
Yeah. But the detective work outside of that weird situation with blowing the tank, I love the fact that there's a detective element to this. The fact that it seems, the fact that he's actually going to be trying to figure out what's going on, who's behind this, how that ends up being potentially connected to this hulking creature that we see at the end of the issue. Like, I'm really looking forward to it because it legitimately feels like we're telling a Batman-centric story. Not that I didn't enjoy the Bat Family stuff, because I did, but I want to see Detective Comics one of two ways. I either want to see Batman actually being a detective and figuring situations and cases and solving cases, doing that if it's a solo story, or I want to see it as a Bat Family story where everyone's involved and there's mysteries that involve all of the Bat Family. That's the other aspect. Random stories that just have Batman in it, and there's not any detecting happening, and there's not any solving of crimes. It's just, I'm here to fight some people, and all I need to do is go find the villain of the week so that I can find out why things are happening. That's not being a detective. And it just doesn't add anything to the Batman mythos. I want to see stuff that actually like makes Batman into the hero that we know he is. So, all right. Outside of that, like we said, this is the beginning. I don't have anything else other than that. We did discuss it pretty in depth. I will say the art. I love this art. This is very much DC House style, in my opinion, but I don't have any problem with that. It reminds me of Jason Fabic, but I feel like this is more clean. I don't know why, but I feel like there's less it's not grittiness, but the detail that goes into this feels more like it's the shadowing and the inks and things like that, more so than...
Well, Fabic uses a lot of cross-hatching, so his shadows look less clean, and this used a lot more coloring for the shadows, so that's going to have a lot more plain, pure blacks, so that'll have a cleaner effect on your eye.
And I like that.
My main issue with the art was it just looked like Batman was always in blue. And I was like, that's a little weird. It kind of threw me off a little bit. But, yeah, it's really good. I enjoyed it a lot.
I know what you mean, the reflection.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention, there was a guest artist, Jorge Fornes, for Batman, and I did want to shout him out because I thought his stuff was really vivid. So I think it's been a good week for Batman art with Mankey and Janine, and then the guest art by Fornes.
Yeah. This month has actually been a good month for Batman comics in general.
Even with one missing week.
Yeah, so far. I mean, I say that, but And yeah, anyway. All right, so I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5.
I'll give it a 4 out of 5 because that's what they gave it on the site.
3 out of 5.
All right, so that's going to give Detective Comics a total of 3.5 out of 5 batarangs. That is all of our in-depth reviews. Let's jump over to the site for Greater Gotham. Starting with, we have the first set of books from December 5th, main TBU books. We already talked about Batman number 60. Nightwing number 54. Rick Grayson has a breakthrough in therapy and moves forward in his relationship with Bay. Meanwhile, Sapenza and his crew patrol the streets as Nightwings. This is by Adele. He gave it 3 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs down.
Red Hood Outlaw number 29 is Batwoman and Red Hood take on the town of Appleton. Jason learns more about Underlife's true roots and where they are truly located. This is reviewed by Bill. He gave it 2.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Neutral.
Thumbs up.
Harley Quinn number 55. Harley is excited about the festive season, but her family is visiting, and unfortunately this one has a sting in the tail. This is reviewed by David. He gave it 4 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Abstain.
Thumbs up.
Secondary TV books, Archie meets Batman 66, number 5. Even though Batman and Archie's gang rescue their friends, all does not look rosy for our heroes. So by Ian, he gave it 2.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Abstain.
Neutral.
Batman The Max, Arkham Dreams number 3. Dr. Jaspari's experiments are put into further question as Penguin, Joker, and Harley are the next subjects. This is by Bob. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs down.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Main DC Universe books, Adventures of the Super Sons number 5. The boys come face to face with their future selves, but in a strange turn of events realize that they are constructs created by a being known as the Wonder Machine. This is by Bill. He gave it 4 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Neutral.
Abstain.
Deathstroke number 38 is Slade, Joseph, and Rose face mounting challenges all over the world. Surprises await them all. This is by Ian. He gave it 4 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Neutral.
2 thumbs up.
Doomsday Clock number 8. Superman tries to stop Russia from declaring war against the United States while Lois gets a mysterious envelope. This was reviewed by Tony. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
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 Justice League number 13, the Legion of Doom is down a few members, so the supervillain community shows up to turn in their resumes. This is by Corbin. He gave it 3 out of 5 and gives one a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Abstain.
And then secondary DC Universe books, Suicide Squad Black Files number 2, Deadshot and Harley Quinn appear in the issue. Jumping over to December 12th, we have main TBU books. We already talked about Detective Comics. Batman Annual number 3, as a flu-ridden Batman hunts the skies of Gotham for murderous drones. Alfred takes center stage. This was reviewed by Ian. He gave it 4 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
And if you're interested more about the Batman Annual, this is actually one of the issues that we reviewed as part of TBU Extra for our Patreon supporters. So if you want to hear us talk more in depth about Batman Annual, be sure to support us on Patreon and get that extra TBU episode. The Batman Who Laughs, number 1. Bruce finds an alternate version of himself, and the Joker makes a surprising and bold move to stop the Batman Who Laughs. So by Tony, he gave it 4.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Neutral.
Secondary TBU books, Batman Damned number 2. Batman continues to be haunted by the supernatural as he sets out to prove that the Joker is still alive. So by Paul, he gave it 3.5 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a neutral.
Neutral.
Thumbs down.
Main DC Universe books, Justice League Dark number 6. Detective Chimp atones for his failures. So by Tony, he gave it 4 out of 5. I'm going to give this one a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Neutral.
Suicide Squad number 49, Flag confronts a captive Waller over her involvement in the death of his army unit as mysterious energy threatens to destroy the world. So by Paul, he gave it 1 out of 5, and we give this one a thumbs down.
Abstain.
Abstain.
And then secondary DC Universe books, New Talent Showcase 2018 number 1, Throughout the collection of stories, multiple TBU characters appear. In Leap of Faith, Batman, Victor Zsasz, and Alfred appear. And in Pedigree, Catwoman, Alfred the Cat, Robin, Penguin, Alfred, and Bruce Wayne appear in that story. Titans number 31, Batman appears as the team heads to the Hall of Justice. And then finally, TBU trades and hardcovers over the past 2 weeks include Batman Detective Comics Volume 8 on the Outside trade paperback, Batman Rebirth Deluxe Edition Book 3 hardcover, Batgirl Volume 4 Strange Loop trade paperback, Harley Quinn Volume 1 Harley vs. Apocalypse trade paperback, Batman The Dark Knight Returns DC Moderns Classic Edition hardcover, Trinity Volume 4 The Search for Steve Trevor trade paperback, Injustice 2 Volume 3 trade paperback, Injustice 2 Volume 4 hardcover, Batman The Golden Age Omnibus Volume 6 hardcover, and Harley Loves Joker by Paul Dini hardcover. So if you are interested in any of the issues that we gave a thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral, or abstain rating to, those all have detailed reviews over on the site, including synopsis. So if you're not checking any of those out, you can at least keep up to date with what's going on in the Batman universe by checking out the reviews. Every single week we have reviews for the Bat books and everything we mentioned here. Wednesday, all of the Batman specific books are posted on Wednesday. All of the greater Gotham stuff, the sidekicks, the villains from the Batman universe post on Thursday. And on Fridays, all the greater DC universe books, Justice League, all the team books, all the books that are characters from the Bat universe are part of, appear in those titles. That is on Friday. So that's what you can look forward to. And of course I say this, but as you're listening to this the next week, there are no reviews, because as a reminder to everyone out there who buys your comics, there are no comics in stores the week of December 26th due to the holiday. There is no comics. So don't head to the store, and unfortunately the site will not have any reviews. We will try to get some other content up there for you guys to keep to check out. But in all honesty, there's not a whole lot that happens during that week, so it will be a kind of a slow couple of weeks. So before we move on, I want to quickly take a quick mention to thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you to Theodis, Robert, Stephanie, Brandon, Ian, Anthony, Arturo, Irwin, Brian, G. Dutton, Rail, No Deuces, and Donald. Thank you all very much for supporting us at the $10 or up levels. Thank you to everybody else who's also supporting us at the lower level as well. As you're listening to this, there should be a slew of new content for you Patreon supporters. As you're listening to this, there will be 2 new episodes of TBU Raw, or there's at least 1, but then there's at least 2 episodes of TBU Extra as well. So there's at least 3 new episodes. So you'll have plenty of content to listen to over the holiday weekends and your vacation. And let's be honest, if you go to family members' houses that you don't really care about, you can just plug in your headphones and listen to the Batman universe. So between the comic cast and all the other stuff that we're putting out, there's multiple hours. I know that there's also a new episode of Back with the Oracle, which is their 9th anniversary episode, is also coming out in the final part of No Man's Land. So there's all kinds of content for you guys to check out. So thank you very much to our Patreon supporters. Greatly appreciate it. If you are so inclined to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can head over to the site, click on the Support TBU up in the menu bar. It gives you a bunch of different options. You can go on to our Spreadshirt store, which has a bunch of options for you to buy different shirts and things with different logos that are different designs that we've had made up for merchandise for you guys to purchase. And then you get something, and then we get a little bit of a kickback for selling that merchandise as well. You can also give us a one-time donation on PayPal or support us on Patreon, and then you get extra content as far as different things that we release as well. So all kinds of stuff. Also, remember that if you support before the end of December, you will be entered into the drawing for the last quarter of 2018's giveaway. And that giveaway includes a variety of different items, and you can check that out over on Patreon if you want the full list. But it also includes a $150 Eagle Moss Hero Collector Batman statue that stands over 1.5 feet tall. So if you are so inclined to support us, that is a reward that we have as one of our things. And all you need to do is just get an entry into that by getting at the $10 level. So one $10 level will get you 1 entry for the month of December, and then you're entered into that contest as well. So keep that in mind for for the future. So, with that being said, we're going to jump straight into our listener Q&As.
Boy, did you get a wrong number. Leave your message at the sound of the shriek. No, please, don't!
And we have a bunch. After I complained, I guess, 2 episodes in a row, people decided they were going to make sure that we got stuff. So the first comment comes. So I also did a much better job of making sure I try to port the stuff over that we have from Discord. In the future, this was brought up on Discord, but if you join our Discord, have a question for us, and you as long as you tag me in it, I will make sure to do it. I try to do my best to port over anything else from Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, but if you have a comment, as long as you tag us, we should be able to find it, and then we'll do it. So, first comment comes from Jared, who says, "Hey guys, just listening to the podcast now, so I may have further comments later. But you have brought up Injustice a couple of times, acting like you weren't too sure why it seems to be the little engine that could. I'd just like to plug and inform a little about it to maybe garnish some interest for you or other listeners. The first Injustice series was a 5-year-long prequel to the events of the game, even though I believe the game came first. The story mode in the game was one of the best Justice League stories I've ever seen, so I decided to pick up the prequel comic. I was hesitant since, honestly, I've never been able to get into Justice League comics. These characters seem to work better on their own, but I knew it could work because of the great storylines in the animated series from Bruce Timm from the early 2000s. What I ended up reading in Injustice actually surpassed the quality of the video games. Tom Taylor had takes on each character that have never been explored before, yet never seemed like a drastic re-envision. Not gimmicky as some Elseworld stories seem, this, and it was genuinely funny in parts, like I don't normally laugh out loud during DC's gritty comics, and even though this has the darkest storyline imaginable, Superman going evil after Joker tricks him into killing Lois, somehow very human moments are captured with some of the side characters, Harley Quinn and Green Arrow's relationship especially. During the issues, Tom Taylor left the quality definitely diminished, but I believe he came back for the last arc. Injustice 2, the game was released, and then it is when the comic was relaunched, bridging the gap between the two games, again serving as a prequel now to the second game. Tom Taylor returned for the whole series this time, and it was still very well written, even though I knew how it all ends, which is usually my issue with prequels of any sort. So that being said, I'm sure if and when a third Injustice game is released, they will probably release another story leading up to it. I don't think we have seen the end of Injustice, but if we have, I'd really like to see Tom Taylor to move into regular DC continuity, because I think any character is in great hands with him. So, if I anyway sparked you to read this epic saga, it also has it's also interactive considering the games. The order to do would be this: read Injustice years 1 through 5, then play the story mode of Injustice. You can do that in about 3 hours, if I remember right, and you can pick it up for about $5. Just watch the cutscenes on YouTube, Then read Injustice 2 and play the story mode Injustice 2, the game. Also, remember, this was one of the first digital comics, so the first year it was a little jumbled as far as the artist changes and flow are concerned. It sort of feels like a bunch of collected short stories, but don't let that deter you. If you keep reading, you will be happy you did. P.S. Also, this being a Batman podcast, I need to mention at its core, this is a Batman vs. Superman story. Superman gathering heroes on his side to lead the planet with his idea of judge, jury, and executioner, and Batman amassing his group of heroes to stop him. Some of the directions it takes members of the Bat family has never been seen before and are heart-wrenching. For example, Damian goes to Superman's side, so the father-son dynamic between the two is greatly heightened, to say the least. Read it. So, thank you, Jared, for chiming in and giving us a little bit more knowledge about Injustice. I have been keeping up with the series. I just I say this. When I say I don't understand how it lasted as long as it did, it's not to say that what they've put out isn't good. It's not by any means. I don't understand how it's lasted so long just because it has lasted as long as it has. I knew it was one of the original digital series. It's been around for years. I mean, so much
think
so
about
that
this. How many published, like paper published first books have been around for 5 years?
yeah,
That's a
and
really long
especially
time
stuff
for any
that's not in
series.
continuity. That's the biggest thing. It's not in continuity. There's nothing else out there. I mean, Bombshells launched sometime after Injustice, but it was not around nearly as long as Injustice. It's insane how long it's been around. So it's not when I say it's more of a not a judge on quality as to why it has been around that long. More of a it's very hard to believe that a series that's outside of continuity, that's literally a tie-in to a video game that doesn't take place in the normal DC universe, was able to last that long. I know the quality was good, and I've had lots of different people say it is a really good story, and the bits and parts that I've kept up with have been really good. It's just incredible to see something like that last as long as it did. That's all.
You just kind of wish DC could figure out how that happened so they could duplicate it, get
Yes.
that kind of longevity on their other series.
Yes, exactly. All right, our next comment comes from ACN. Comment came via Twitter. He says, great show. I always listen right away. One question for a future Monkey Watch. Are creative teams held in such high esteem during or after their runs? Snyder, Johns, Miller, etc., even King. If he's selling so well, why stop at 105? Got a ton more questions. I'm newer to comics last 5 years after being away for 35 years plus. Some things make so little sense to me, so I just don't understand. I'll be posting comments/questions regularly. Thank you, ACN. I know you're also on our Discord, and you've been getting some of your questions answered. If you have questions that you would like immediate responses to, be sure to join our Discord. The link is over on the site on the homepage. That being said, I will say this. Creative teams, I think it comes down to two things. Sometimes runs can be extremely popular after the fact. Like, for example, Frank Miller's Year One. That was good at the time, but I don't think anybody thought. See, I wasn't around back then, so I can't speak to current times. But I don't know that anybody at the time was saying like this is an amazing piece of work that is going to be regarded as one of the better Batman stories for years and years and years. I don't know that anybody was doing that. I mean, like, there was definitely a tonal shift within the universe after Year One happens, but I don't know that that's directly related to what we saw from Frank Miller with Year One. Now, if you look at Dark Knight Returns, that came out around the same time as Watchmen. There was a whole shift in the entire mentality of what was going on in comics during that time frame. And it was also very much outside of the normal realm of what we would typically see in a Batman comic, because Batman is much older, it's taking place in the future. It's not stuff we typically saw. So that's Miller. Now, when you speak of like Scott Snyder, his stuff originally, Black Mirror was really good. I really enjoyed Black Mirror when it first released. I reviewed it and thought it was great. And I think...
And I want to chime in and say that as someone who has not liked anything Snyder's done for 7 years, Black Mirror is one of the best comics ever written. Yeah.
Black Mirror is really good. The thing is that I think Black Mirror was so good and was getting such a good critical response that is why DC...
But it sounds like crap.
Yeah, it sold really badly. But I think that DC took a risk on having Snyder kind of take over Batman at the beginning of the New 52. Very similar to, in some ways, what they did with Tom King taking over Batman at the beginning of Rebirth. Sure, Tom King had worked on other stuff, nowhere near the scope of something like Batman. I mean, let's be honest here. Batman is typically one of the top tier books for DC Comics, and to have a writer who has done a couple of miniseries prior to this, and even if they are really, really well received by the critics, none of the stuff that he was putting out was selling extremely well. So to put him on a book like Batman, and this goes for Snyder too, because before Snyder was on Detective Comics, he had done American Vampire, he had done a short story for Marvel, and that was it. I mean, outside of American Vampire, he didn't have a ton of work out there that you could judge him off of. American Vampire was selling well for a Vertigo book, but again...
So 2,000 copies?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, you don't have to, and I keep saying let's be honest, but you don't have to sell a ton of stuff or a bunch of issues from Vertigo in order to be successful. They have a lower expectation when it comes to those titles. So they took a risk on Snyder and they took a risk on King. That being said, Batman is normally a very high-selling book. So unless you're just doing an absolute garbage job on the title, the book will sell well. I mean, it just does. So much so that when the lists are created for comic sales and things, Batman is the standard that everyone uses to say this is where the level typically would be because they're basing off of Batman because Batman sells so consistently month to month. So I think that sometimes sometimes creators are held in high esteem because of the sales. If they're attached to a series that has really high sales, that says a lot. But I feel like that's a exaggerated point sometimes because of the title that they're on.
It's misleading when you attach them to titles that have long-running characters.
Yes, like when you take a character or you take Scott Snyder and you put him on Batman at the beginning of the New 52, Batman's going to sell well. And as long as Snyder does a good job of making the story readable, people enjoy it, the art is good, people are going to keep reading it. And then the thing is, if people are talking about it, it could sell more. Typically books don't sell more. They typically go down. We've seen that almost in every reboot that they've done is that they sell really well at the beginning and it slowly goes down because it's just how sales work. But I would say when you're comparing creators who have been on big titles, it's very difficult to say that their high esteem is related to anything except for the fact that the book is selling well and it's on one of the top books for the company. When you look at somebody like Jeff Johns, who has done, specifically, Batman Earth 1, and I'm just talking about Batman stuff here, but like he's written Batman in Justice League, he's written Batman in Batman Earth 1. His stuff isn't selling nearly to the lengths of Scott Snyder or Tom King because he's not on the Batman title. If he was on the Batman title, there's a very good chance that he could sell just as much as Snyder or Tom King. And as we've seen, some of the issues that Tom King takes a break on or Scott Snyder took a break on, it's not as if those issues sell that much less than the previous month. And it's because that's just how that series works. So I would say that when it comes to their high esteem, a lot of it has to do with the books they're on, and a lot of it derives from how much they're selling. If they're selling a lot for a long period of time, people are going to look at them and say, well, they know what they're doing because they're selling for a long time. It's a little jaded when you look at it from the perspective of, but they're on the top-selling character book that repeatedly sells very well month to month. So that's the only problem. When you look at other titles, like, for example, just as an example, because these are longer runs, Greg Rucka on Detective Comics, when he was writing Batwoman, the stuff wasn't selling as well, but it was a good run, and people really enjoyed it, and the art was great by J.H. Williams, and people really, were appreciating what was happening. It just wasn't selling, so you don't hear as much about it. Grant Morrison's on Batman sold like hotcakes, but when he wasn't on Batman and he left Batman and he went to Batman Incorporated and Batman Robin, when that was happening, you don't hear a lot of talk about the other people on it. Grant Morrison can go from one book to the other, and he's an example of somebody who could go from like Batman to really well, go over start a title like Batman and Robin, stay on it for the first year of the book, and then move over to a different title, and those books can last for a while. And he's done that a bunch of different times. Scott Snyder, I don't think is up there like that because he has had his name on a bunch of books that outside of plotting he hasn't really been involved in, but those books don't last. They just don't. And I think a lot of it has to do with just the concepts that the books are, and that's why they haven't lasted. So, yeah.
Well, ACN also asked the good question, if he's selling so well, why stop at 105? I think that's a really good question, and I would say it's because you don't want a creator who no longer wants to write the title. King doesn't want to write after he finishes his 100 issues. He doesn't have a story. He's a good writer. I think he could probably come up with one, but you can usually tell when a creator doesn't want to be in a title anymore, their stuff just... I mean, if they don't care, why should the readers care? And I think that's obvious. So that's why a creator will choose to leave a title. They told the story they wanted to tell, and they want to move on.
Yeah, and the other part of that is, outside of just telling the story that they want to tell, as a creator, you work on a character for a specific amount of time. There's very few people who want to be working on the same thing, especially a creator, whether, in any media form. There's very few creators who want to work on the same thing for an extended amount of time. They tell their story. They do what they want to do. Like you see this with showrunners of TV shows. They're on the series for a certain amount of time. They leave the show in the hands of somebody else who's very capable, or in some cases not capable. But they leave the show and they go off and they do something else. They did what they wanted to do, but they don't want their entire focus to be on this one singular thing forever. There's very few creators who want to stay on the same character for a long time, because just think of it like this. Okay, as a creator, you're limited to what you can do. You can, there are certain creators who they can churn out 3-4 different series a month. Okay, but the thing is, unless you're at every single one of those series that you have, you just keep coming up with ideas, you're not going to be on all those series for a long time. Scott Snyder was on Swamp Thing and Batman at the very beginning of the New 52. He eventually stepped back from Swamp Thing. Then he did the Superman Unchained, which I think was really just them trying to pull his name onto a big Superman title at the time. And they had Jim Lee on the art, and we all know how that will end up when you put Jim Lee on a book format. But I mean, like, eventually he tells the story that he wants to tell, and then he moves on to something else. I mean, like, we see this a lot with creators, and it's to say, like, as somebody who's not very creative myself, I can honestly say it's very difficult to just get yourself to do the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, I do the podcast, which is probably the most creative thing I do when it comes to the site. Everything else is just like, working through the motions of the normalcy of what needs to happen. But talking on the podcast is probably the most creative thing I have. And, like, honestly, coming up with things to talk about sometimes about these issues, there's not always a ton of stuff to talk about. Sometimes it's just there. And as a creator, you don't want to have to just do it to do it. And I think Tom King told himself, he set himself a goal. He wanted to do 100 issues. Now it's 105 to fill in the gaps of what he didn't do. But he wanted to do 100 issues, which roughly translates to just over 4 years on a book. That's still less time than Scott Snyder was on the title, but it's way more issues and way more things to write for the series. So that being said, I think that ultimately he told himself, I could come up with stories for 4 years. I'm going to try to tell as many stories as I can related to these characters within that time frame. And I think that's what he's doing. I mean, I think that he has this idea, and some of these stories that we're getting, as much as we might not appreciate them as much as he would like us to, I think that the stories that he's telling are things that he knows that he wanted to tell, or he's come up with that he wants to tell just to make sure that he can reach his goal of 100 issues. But I think that by the time he gets to the end of his story, he's going to feel like he actually achieved what he was trying to accomplish. And as a creator, getting to the point, like finishing a movie, finishing a script, making, writing a comic, if you're getting to where you want to be and you're content with that, there's no reason you need to continue. I mean, you certainly could. He could leave Batman and go off to do some other title that has Batman in it. Maybe he wants to move over to Detective Comics. We've seen plenty of creators over the years go from one title and move over to another title and then take some time off and then come back. I mean, Paul Dini has written Batman stuff off and on for years and years and years. And to that degree, Peter Tomasi has written Batman characters for years and years and years too. So, I mean, like, there are lots of creators where you just want to take a step back, maybe not worry about that character, or in Tom King's case, be the epitome of what the books should be at that point, because he's the top selling book. It's also a lot of pressure. And I think there's a lot of backlash that comes from being a top tier creator. I think that somebody like Grant Morrison, you see him in the spotlight for a while, and then he like disappears for a long time, and then he comes back and he's in the spotlight, and then he disappears for a long time. And I think that as a creator, I think that they just have to do that. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like Tom King, he had a security guard that everyone kind of loved. He had a security guard at like Comic-Con because people didn't, were upset with some of they didn't like issue 50 and they were just complaining. Like that just takes a toll on you when you're writing fiction and you have a family. And it's like, I don't, like how much do you want to do that just to write a comic? I'm not saying, writing comics is bad or whatever, but you got to take that into consideration. It's just like, is this scrutiny worth it? Is the mean things that people say on Twitter about maybe you or, your wife or your family, like, is that going to be worth it? And yeah, like why, just because he's doing well doesn't mean that he has to keep doing it. What we're talking about right now, only thing I can think of is Dan Jurgens. He wrote Superman for years and years and years and he quit. Like, his Superman, the latest one to Rebirth was really good, but he didn't have to stop doing it. And so, yeah, if he wants to quit after 105, then that's great. But between now and then, maybe he comes up with another cool story and just keeps on. Like he's not limited to just stopping. And yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. There's no reason why he should keep doing it if he doesn't want it.
I think ultimately it just comes down to he wants to do it for at least that. And like Tony said, if he comes up with other ideas of how to do it or to do it longer, then he probably would. But ultimately, that's what he just told himself he wanted to do. And like you obviously want to set goals for yourself in whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're always going to set goals for yourself. So I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. All right, so our next comment comes from Palo Tegrin, also from our Discord. And they specifically asked, how did you each get into podcasts? So there could be two different ways to answer this question. I'm gonna go into option number one. Option number one is, how did you first get into podcasting, like listening to podcasts, get into hearing a podcast, things like that? And then option two would be, how did you get into the TBU podcast? So option number one for me is, the first time I ever heard a podcast was back in 2009, right around Christmas time. Not 2009. I don't know why I said 2009. 2007. 2007, there was a short-lived podcast that only had 4 episodes. I had just gotten a iPod for the very first time, and I created an iTunes account, discovered podcasts, typed in Batman to see what would pop up. There was a short-lived 4-episode podcast where there was a guy and he talked about Batman and talked about stuff, the rumors relating to the Dark Knight at the time, and briefly talked about some other Batman news. It wasn't a very long show, but he had 4 episodes. And I kept thinking, is he going to release any more? And it had been at like 2 months since the last time he released an episode. And that's ultimately why I decided to do the podcast and start the Batman universe, was because I was like, well, if he's not going to do it, well, then I'll do it because I've got extra time. And here we are, over 10 years later, almost 11 years since then. And the podcast has become a website and a slew of other podcasts and all kinds of other stuff that we do, and has become way more than I can handle by myself. And that's why I'm super thankful for all the people that we have working on the site, whether they review comics or the other people who produce podcasts or write the news. Lots of people are helping get everything produced. Now, option 2, how did I get involved in the TBU podcast? Well, that's self-explanatory. So I defer the question to you guys.
I guess I'll go ahead and answer. I'll answer in reverse. How did I get into podcasting? Dustin needed somebody, and so I responded to the call. Literally, this is like my 3rd podcast because somebody, I think, steps out, and so I'm filling in. Back up. Anyway, how did I listen? How did I get started into listening to podcasts? Well, goodness sakes. I guess a couple years ago, going to college, going to graduate school, Parking is hard to do in a metropolitan area where my school was. And so I'm cheap, and I didn't pay the $50 per semester parking pass, whatever, wanted to get good exercise and wouldn't mind spending 20 minutes for a good walk, 15, and got big into podcasts and got big into learning. I'm all about learning and all about optimizing time. And, you could do the both with podcasts. So over the years, I have my podcast collection and library is huge. And yeah, it's pretty much, I just want to learn all that I can as quick as I can and utilize my time. So that's how I got there.
So I completely agree with Tony. When I was in grad school, and even now I still work on the college I went to, I don't park on campus. I walk. But I actually got into podcasts when I was an undergrad in, I think, 2006, 2007-ish. I got into Firefly Podcast, the television show.
There's a
and I've just listened. Oh, there's tons of them. A lot more back then because the movie had just come out. But around 2009 or 10-ish is when I first stumbled upon Stella's podcast. And Stella's podcast, Batgirl to Oracle. And that eventually migrated to the Batman universe, which is literally how I found the Batman universe. I am one of the people who constantly bugs Stella with letters and questions. And so she actually suggested that I could fill in a couple times on the TBU podcast when she was a regular host and couldn't make it. So that's how I got started. And then, hosts rotated and Dustin put out the call and I volunteered because I've always wanted to talk about podcasting and Batman and comics and analyzing things. So I thought this would be a good way to help out the site because I've been reviewing since 2015 and also sort of get experience because eventually I'd like to start doing some kind of material on, my favorite characters like Stephanie Brown and the Huntress. And I didn't want to do that as a complete noob. So that's how I got into it here.
So basically what Ian's telling you is if you're looking for the Stephanie Brown podcast, it's around the corner.
I've been thinking about it for 6 years, so around the corner is putting it a little quick.
Oh, hey, it could be another 3 years around the corner. Sure. All right, so our next comment comes from ACN, this time from Discord. He's got two questions. The first one says, how did you get into comics? So I've said this story a bunch of times, but I'll just quickly say it again. And not that ACN didn't hear me, but I know that not all of these questions are related specifically to me because I have said these multiple times. So if you've been a long time listener, you've probably heard this before. So the first time I got into comics was I was a kid. My dad would take me to a grocery store to go grocery shopping. They had a section of magazines, and the bottom shelf of the magazine area had comics. I used to read Archie comics and get Archie Digest. Whenever my family would take a road trip, we would get the Archie Double Digest and things like that. And my mom would buy one for me so that I'd have something to read on the way there, but obviously something that wasn't super expensive. When my dad took me to the supermarket, I would read through the comics that were there. Didn't really know anything about continuity or anything. But I must have talked about it enough because my mom suggested to a family friend who was asking what to get me for Christmas one year to get me a subscription to comic books. I had a mail order subscription to the tie-in comic series for the Batman the Animated Series, which was like 4 different series over the course of multiple years. Eventually, that came. I read the heck out of them. I still have one of my original copies of the first comic that came, and man, it is beat up. But those came. Eventually, I realized I should probably start taking care of them and tried to figure out a way to turn one of my dresser drawers into a makeshift long box / short box because it wasn't that big. But did that, and then I got some birthday money, and my mom took me to a local comic shop, and I ended up looking for something that had like a bunch of. I was looking for trades, but I was looking for something that was like a bigger story. And it just so happened around the time that I was at the comic shop, the No Man's Land was collected and had of a side binding that was the yellow and black caution tape, and I could see that they were all connected because of that similar binding, and immediately it was like, I'm going to get this stack. And I ended up getting Cataclysm and all 4 volumes at the time, brought them home, read the heck out of them, and I've been hooked on comics ever since. I really dived in the summer of 2007 is when I like crazy went nuts and was spending way more money than I should have on comics on eBay, buying like giant lots to like fill in my collection and things. And here we are more than 10 years later than that. And I've got sitting literally behind me as I'm recording this, short boxes that are filled with over 6,000 comics, all Batman family books. So, it's been nuts, and obviously there's that. So, how did you guys get into comics?
I've always been a big fan of superheroes. Just as a kid, just really resonated with me. Watched all the movies and got into toys. I've really enjoyed that aspect, but never really got into comics so much as in the past couple of years. I guess my journey into comics is a little bit more, you can go sad and or tragic, but going through graduate school, and I just, so I got my degree in math, and math is hard and intense and just struggling and going to school and being on your own and whatnot. I just had a couple issues, had a couple breakdowns and whatnot. And so I was like, okay, I need something that's completely, I don't have to think. It should be easy. It should be fun and whatnot. And I'm a big movie person, so I was thinking about that. Well, I've watched all the movies I really kind of want to see more times, so can't really get big into that again. I watch a whole bunch of TV in my free time, so it's like I can't really get into that as well. And so I need to find something that I can enjoy, that could take my mind off of life and can help me out, not be so stressed. So I was like, man, I've never really gotten into comics, and so started to delve more into comics, and that was pretty awesome. And then I found the TBU podcast, and then being able to tweet Dustin and get involved with Discord and all that stuff. So that's pretty much my journey with comics.
I came into comics a bit later. I would consider it later. The first comic I remember I read when I was 14 at the library, it was No Man's Land, where Superman comes to No Man's Land, and he checks and sees if Batman's okay, and Batman's like, yes, I am. So Superman leaves. And I didn't read a lot of comics for another couple of years, and then I read another one. And then I started just getting more and more. So I was in my late teens when I started borrowing trades from the library. I was in college when I started reading single issues. And I would also go to a bookstore that was just a mile away from my college. I just sit and read trades in the bookstore. And then in grad school, with the New 52, I kind of dropped out of reading comics because the New 52 destroyed pretty much everything I wanted to read about. Came back in 2014, did a lot of back reading, so I actually have read a lot of the New 52, so I'm not completely ignorant. I just wasn't there when it was happening. As I said, Stella did the Batgirl to Oracle podcast, so that's how I got involved in the site and sort of really focusing on Batman, although I always had this sort of affiliation with the Bat family, this broken individuals forming a thing greater than themselves. I think Tony put it well when he was searching for different fandoms. Comics is a fandom that's smaller, so it's not as intimidating or scary. I mean, you get in a really big TV or movie fandom, it's just there's so much content and so many people you never form relationships. But a comic book fandom, you can find the kinds of relationships you find on a site like the TBU or the various Discords or Reddits or message boards. And so I really like that community that we have with the regular content every week and the small enough group of commenters so you can really form those relationships. So that's why I'm still in comics, probably about 10 years after I first seriously started reading them.
Yeah. So the second question that ACN said, with all the effort that goes into the site and podcast, have you ever lost any of your passion or enthusiasm of comics or Batman? I'm going to wait to answer this until the end. did you guys ever have a moment where, I know that both of you review a bunch of books on the site and have reviewed a bunch of books over the time you guys have been here, but have you ever really had a moment where the stuff you're reviewing or that you're having to read on a normal basis takes a toll?
Yes. Goodness sakes. To answer, I guess, to answer this in two parts. So it is stressful. Well, not stressful. It's just disappointing and hard, and it's hard to make time to review comics that you don't enjoy. Dustin does assign them, but we kind of volunteer for some books, and sometimes you get what you want to review, and sometimes you don't. And I first started out, and I had to review Batwoman, and I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't hate it, but it just wasn't for me. Just the writing for me, I just didn't enjoy it personally. And so it was kind of hard to make yourself write content for something you don't enjoy. I think one of the hardest times has been really the past 6 issues of Detective. If you read those reviews, they get shorter and shorter and shorter just because I don't have that much to say. And so during those times, it was just hard to think of things to say in a professional manner where you're trying to be polite and nice and professional, but you just don't like the content. So it's like, how much more opinions can you have besides I don't like it? So that's why we created the I Want Tomasi t-shirt. So that's the stressful part, but I mean, it's hard to, you have a life and, writing, reviewing comics. Usually it's, I don't know, my count, it's probably like 4 or 5 a month. And, I do enjoy it, but that's just a lot of work. And this past month has been stressful just because I started a new job and I had to earn a job and it was just a little crazy. And so, I was a little disappointed and it's a little stressful and it's tiring, but at the end of the day, it's fiction and it's just fun. And, you're going back to your superheroes. And I think it's important that I remember that, I have heroes out there. And if they are fictional, to me, it's just a way to reconnect and, gain that hope again. So, I have to force to read comics and, it's nice to be reminded of the good in life. So that's pretty much how I view this job and reviewing and reading comics for the site.
My interests tend to go cyclically, so I have about 4 or 5 things that I really love, and I'll spend more or less time on them. I think I've really found a community in comics that's kept me invested for a lot longer than I would have expected. Not that I would ever lose interest in Batman or the Batman family, but I've definitely gone cyclically. And as I said, in 2011 to 2014, I just left because I wasn't seeing it. I think that's more just my personality rather than necessarily quality dropping or getting better. So I don't think that there's anything that really burns me out per se. I've always been able to find something I like. I think I went into this a little bit a couple podcasts ago. It might have been last podcast where I talked about what gets you excited about Batman. And I admitted, other than Deathstroke, there's no Batman comic I'm really loving. I'm liking Tom King's, and I really love analyzing Tom King's run, but I don't collect it myself. And I do get frustrated. It's more the kind of thing I would buy in trade because I think it's better as a big story.
So, I've been doing this for a long time. Between the podcast and the site, like I said, we're going to be 11 years at the end of January. It's been a long time since I've been doing this. And I will say this, okay? So when I started out, I tried to read as much as I possibly could. And I had way more free time than I have now. And building the site, I was trying to create archives. Let's just put it this way. There is so much stuff that I tried to put together in the very beginning of the days of the website and the podcast that never came to fruition that I spent so much time on trying to build. For example, I was going to build an archive related to Bat gadgets, and I was going to comb through each individual comic and find references or a picture of the gadget and then create an archive so that anybody could figure out which, if you were looking for a grapple gun, here's all the locations of this that you could do. Now, obviously, there's things like that have popped up, with Wiki and the Wikias out there. They have, objects and things like that. But I was legitimately scanning shots from printed comics to include to show, hey, this was in that. I spent way more time than I ever should have on that project, but that wasn't the only one. I was also trying to create a character database similar to the one that DC Universe is slowly building right now, the encyclopedia that they're building over on the streaming app. I was trying to do that and come up with locations of where all these characters existed. And yes, there are millions of places that have that now, but none of those places were really, there was a few out there that existed back when I was doing this, but needless to say, there was way more stuff that never came to happen with the Batman universe. There was a whole area that was going to dedicate to the history of the different topics. You'll notice that when you go to the site, there's news and editorials for all the topics that we cover. But I was actually trying to create, if you've been around long enough, you'll know that the original site had history links where we had created history elements for each and every single previous Bat film or the TV series. And we tried to do, I literally had made my own screenshots of the Bat films as I watched them so that we'd have our own little gallery of things. There was so much stuff that I did. And then now it's all gone. I mean, I still have some of it saved to my hard drive, but most of it is no longer around, and I spent a lot of time. That being said, when I was doing this, I was reading tons of comics, and over the years, I have no problem admitting, outside of the Bat books that we specifically mention during Greater Gotham, I don't have time to read very much. I used to read Green Arrow. That was one of the few books that I was still reading as of a couple of years ago. I don't read that anymore. I just read what we talk about here on the podcast. I'm sure that there are other books out there that are good quality, that are not DC, that are not Marvel, that are not the Bat books, but I just don't have the time. My life has changed enormously from 11 years ago to now too. 11 years ago, I was newly married. I was in the military, but I had an enormous amount of free time because my wife worked complete opposite shifts that I worked. So I would come home, have the entire night to do whatever I wanted to do before I would go to bed, wake up, go to work, and then come home. My wife was on opposite shifts, so I had all this free time. The weekends, I had free time. I had a massive amount of free time. I also lived in Kansas at the time, which was in the middle of nowhere, and there wasn't a lot to do. I mean, I went to the movies a lot, but there was not a lot to do that I was going to go out and actually do. So I filled my time with the site and the podcasts and doing all of that stuff. Now, skip forward to now. I now live in Illinois, in the Chicagoland area, and there's a lot more that I can do if I want to. But I also have 3 kids, and currently they are 8. I have a son who's 8, a daughter who's 4, and another son who's going to be 2 in just a couple weeks. And that's that. And obviously I'm still married. I've got my own business now compared to, before. So I don't have nearly as much time as I used to. That all being said, the site has grown by leaps and bounds compared to what we were 5 years ago. We review all of these books that we talk about in Greater Gotham, and I don't obviously review books myself, but I have to edit every single article that, every review that comes through, every article that you see, I edit those. And I make sure that they post when they're supposed to, they publish. I arrange all the logistics of getting everything done. And there's a lot of people involved now that weren't, 5 years ago, we had probably a third of the amount of people we have working on the site now. And I'm not talking about the podcast. I'm just talking about writing up news articles, creating reviews. We have done a really good job of recruiting people, and we could still use way more because there's just so much stuff to do. But it takes a toll. It really does. And I think that for me, I've had my ups and downs. I try to maintain a normalcy level when it comes to making sure the podcasts and the reviews and the news gets posted. But if you've been around for a long time, you'll notice that there's been times where we don't have news posting all the time. And that's because I just don't have anybody else to write it, and I don't have the time to write it myself. So we just go through a lull of, putting out news. And I've been lucky over the last couple years. We've had people putting together the news articles on the site, so that way they're written up and we can get the news posted regularly. But if it wasn't for that happening, and it wasn't for all the people that we have dedicating their time every single week to get reviews, posted for all these books, we wouldn't be able to do it. But a lot of it relies on me being able to do it too, because if I suddenly fell off the face of the earth, everything would be at a standstill, and that would be extremely unfortunate, but that's the way it is. That being said, I can't read as much stuff as I'd like to. I mean, like I said, there's lots of stuff out there that I'd love to read and get involved in, and I just have had to chop a lot of that stuff out because the site stuff is just such a large amount. So there's that, which is unfortunate. But I will say, in agreement with what Tony was saying, when it's a bad group of books, it really sucks. It really does. And it really takes a toll on your interest level in general. The New 52 was not an enjoyable time. Going into it, even before the books released, I was not thrilled about the direction that DC was going at all. I was not happy with them. And yes, there were some books that happened during the New 52. I enjoyed Batman and Robin. Batman, for the most part, was, enjoyable to the level, not like I loved everything that Snyder was doing, but I could read it. I could enjoy it for what it was. Even if I didn't agree with everything that he was doing, I could, it was something I could read. When you compare it to other books that were out there, like Detective Comics or Catwoman before Genevieve Valentine came on the book, Batgirl, I mean, there were so many books that were just not good. And it was really, really bad. There also was a horrible time where the site got hacked and the entire site was virus ridden, and I had to clear out everything, spend an enormous amount of money out of pocket to, fix the site so that it would be up and running, just so that we could get our podcast post, and not even to just worry about the reviews or news, just to get the podcast released, to get the site back up to do that. That happened around the same time as the New 52 was like a year in, and I was so tempted to just cut it off and just be like, okay, this is a sign and this is it. And that New 52 stuff, and I say this in all seriousness, I was really, really not enjoying anything that was going on. The few issues that were good, it wasn't worth the time that I was putting into it. And it also has a lot to do with the fact that we only reviewed Batman and Detective here on the Comic Cast because there are so many books, but there was a time where we reviewed everything. And when you review books on a podcast every single week or every other week, twice a month or whatever, and you don't enjoy what's going on, it sucks. It really sucks. And there's been a lot of ups and downs. Rebirth, the announcement of Rebirth was really like a pick-me-up moment, like, oh, thank goodness they're finally figuring out that what they did was a mistake. But it did take 5 years. And that 5 years was really long. And, I mean, there was bright moments in between. But a lot of it has to do with, like, I'm still around because I know that this is bigger than me. Everyone who helps out with the site in whatever way, whether they have a podcast that comes out through the site or whether they write news or write reviews, any of the people who are involved with the site, they have shown that they want to dedicate their time to make the site successful and make the Batman fandom bigger than it is. And that's what always pushes me to keep going. Discord has been a great thing, honestly. And I know that we hype up Discord a lot, but it really is a great place for us to chat with other Bat fans about all kinds of different things. And sometimes it's just the staff talking about stuff. We're talking about something that happened in the latest issue. But when we get fans who come in and they're asking questions and we can give them advice about which Bat books to read, or we can answer questions because we know things that they might not know, that stuff's great. And it really does help and give me more momentum to keep going on and doing what we're doing. So it has been its ups and downs, but I can honestly say that this is one of the up times right now because I really like the interaction we have with the fans. I really love when you guys leave comments that you want us to talk about on the episodes because it shows that you guys are really interested in what we're doing, and that's always great. So thank you for doing that. So with that, that is all of the listener Q&As from this episode. Thank you to those of you who left comments. Again, if you want to leave your comments, you can leave them on Twitter or Discord, directly on the website in the comments section. Any of those places, just be sure to tag us, and we will be sure to get those entered into the website and talk about those on the next episode. I do want to just quickly point out, so I said this earlier, December 26th, there's no comics. Because there's no comics and because January has 5 Wednesdays, that means that January typically would be we would have the 3-week gap between episodes. We've decided because there's no comics on the 26th that we're just going to have the 3-week gap in for the next episode. So the next episode that we will actually release will actually release on January 11th. And that will include the next issue of Detective Comics, which will release on January 2nd. So instead of having, you'll still get, the issues, you'll still get an episode every other week in January, but we're just going to take an extra week off in December because of, the comics not shipping. And it's not DC's fault. It's the monopoly that is known as Diamond. But yes, so that being said, you have plenty of time to leave your comments. Again, if you are interested in more content that we have to offer outside of this podcast or the other podcasts we have to offer, you can support us on Patreon and get TBU Extra and TBU Raw. And there's that. So with that being said, that is everything for this episode. Be sure to head over to the site for all the latest news and editorials related to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, and of course the comics. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for all this news and videos from the Batman universe. Leave reviews over on iTunes. Those are always greatly appreciated. Be sure to check out all the other podcasts we have to offer. As I said, Batgirl Oracle has a new episode this week. Robin Everyone Loves Drake just had a new episode recently, too. And Bat Fans will have a new episode, too, coming. So be sure to check out everything we have to offer. There's all kinds of stuff. There's always stuff happening on the site. And then join our Discord. As I said, and as I've hyped multiple times, that is the place to chat with staff, including all of us, including the vast majority of the people who work on the site are over on Discord and, hop on from time to time and chat. So be sure to join there. The link is over on the website, thebatmanuniverse.net. It's right there on the sidebar. Just scroll down just a tad bit, and you'll see it in the sidebar. So with that being said, that is everything. This is Dustin.
This is Tony.
And this is Ian.
You've been listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast. We'll see you guys in 3 weeks. Merry Christmas to all.